Thursday night was high school football night this week as the West Bloomfield Lakers concluded their OAA Red Division schedule against the Oxford Wildcats, with both teams having a shot at least a share of the OAA Red Division title. Unfortunately for the Lakers, things not quite going their way as they fall 14-38 last night at the Swamp on senior night to the Wildcats. Joining me for more analysis on this lopsided football game is our color commentator for our coverage of Laker football, Matt Catoni. Thanks for being with us, Matt.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Happy to have you on, and unhappy with the results, of course, of last night are the fans of the West Bloomfield Lakers and, of course, that program as well, who had such momentum over the last week or so after that 49-41 win over Lake Orion and showing some signs of life and promise on the road a couple of weeks back against Clarkston. Senior night not quite going their way, as it was a beautiful night to start as the seniors and their families were honored just before the football game. But then really from the jump, we saw the power of Oxford on the offensive end, led by Jack Hendricks, their quarterback, a little bit of the receiving game, but really it was all about Luke Johnson.
Yeah, it was really more of a senior nightmare last night. The way that Oxford was able to push around Bloomfield at the line of scrimmage, really both sides of the ball. But Luke Johnson especially shined last night, and really from what you were saying throughout the game just about his personal makeup and his skill on the field, you can just tell that he's going to be a successful player going forward.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player who had 3 touchdowns in that game last night against West Bloomfield, 2 in the first half and 1 late in the game later on to really seal the deal for the Oxford Wildcats. And, you know, it was an interesting game because it started off seeming like Oxford really had the pulse on the Laker defensive front in the running game and were able to execute their game plan, march up the field, get a quick score. But then West Bloomfield came back and answered. But from there is where it really was the turning point as Oxford continued to execute and West Bloomfield seemed to struggle to do the same.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to the experience that Oxford had on their both fronts on offense and defense, especially that offensive line having 4 seniors to rely on that front, and a bit of an inexperienced and younger defensive front for the Lakers. So I feel like kind of similar to what we saw in that Birmingham Groves game where the Lakers just kind of got overpowered up front because they were playing one of the best offensive lines that arguably we will see all season and in the state.
Yeah, the youngest player on that offensive line was actually their blindside tackle on the left side of that line, a sophomore. Everybody else a senior, and really was able to open up that offense for Luke Johnson and even for Jack Hendricks to have a few chances in the pocket to get those footballs to Owen Pavlock and to Eli Carpenter. Jake Champagne had a late touchdown. Alex Barrett had a touchdown off of a screen pass on the short out route early on in the game as well. We really saw an impressive showing from an Oxford team that's been growing over these years, waiting to get to that point where they take their power move forward in the OAA Red Division. And I really think last night was that power move forward to show that they are in the driver's seat of this conference.
Yeah, and really it was a huge win for them to clinch a title for the OAA Red, and really not just clinch that, but also, kind of shove it in West Bloomfield's face a little bit, as much as I hate to say it. But winning it there has to feel that much sweeter for Oxford, knowing West Bloomfield, where they're at as a program, is ultimately where Oxford wants to get back to. It's, a very sweet moment for them and kind of a moment for West Bloomfield where they have to look at themselves going forward these next 2 weeks. And,
it's now a reversal
have to realize
of roles.
where they want to be as a team and what they have to do.
Yeah, definitely. It's a reversal of roles between these two teams, where in the past it's been clear that West Bloomfield's been the power and Oxford's been the team that's got the promise but doesn't quite have it clicking just yet. That's what it seemed like for the Lakers last night as they struggled. They had some issues with penalties, of course. You could also see some mistakes like that botched punt in their end zone that set up a really quick drive and a score for the Oxford Wildcats early on in that matchup. It seemed like the Lakers got a little bit out of sync, a little bit out of sorts, and the penalty bug really affected them last night. How might that ultimately be something that could be the decision maker in whether they continue to have any success in the regular season and set themselves up well for playoff time?
Yeah, and really penalties are the one thing that you can't have when you're in the position the Lakers are, because it can set you behind the sticks and really cost you games like we saw yesterday. At one point, the Lakers have the ball. It's a tie game. They have a chance to go up 14-7. They're moving the ball well on offense. We see a touchdown get wiped off the board. We see a few big plays even get wiped off the board after that, and they end up having to punt the ball. And next thing you know, Oxford takes the lead, and West Bloomfield's playing from behind the rest of the game. So really, it's those penalties that kill drives and also extend drives that they have to try and eliminate.
It seemed like the penalties last night were something we saw more than those big plays from the Lakers. Really, for the first time this season, they've had games where they've had a little bit of the penalty bug that they've been able to get out beyond that, ultimately adjust and improve that discipline. We saw in the last couple of weeks too, both against Clarkston and that loss on the road, but especially last week against Lake Orion in that 49-41 victory. They played a really, really clean game. So looking forward for these Lakers, a couple of weeks left in the regular season. They're going up against Birmingham Seaholm next week, Friday, on October 18th. And this is where we start to see maybe what the Lakers are truly going to be as they get toward playoff time, because while we've seen in the past they've been able to play a really clean game and compete with some of the best in the state, like the Lake Orion Dragons, and even keeping things close for about 3/4 of the way and a little bit beyond that against a team like Clarkston. If they play clean, they have a really good chance against these 5-1 Maples.
Yeah, and really playing two of the best teams in Division II these upcoming weeks in Birmingham, Seaholm, and Roseville, it's going to be up to the Lakers, see where they measure up against the rest of the state. We've seen Hilbers talk about before how being in the OAA Red, it's going to be a battle week in and week out, and sometimes you're not necessarily going to be able to tell where you stand in the state just because of how good your division is. So now it's up to the Lakers. They've had some tough losses, all really to top 15, top 10 teams in the state, arguably. It's going to be up to them to go forward, forget that these next 2 weeks, and just try and compete and play good football and show where they stand in the state still.
Yeah, Seaholm also trying to have something to prove in this upcoming game against West Bloomfield. They could pick up a lot of playoff points off of West Bloomfield's quality win against Lake Orion and lopsided victories against Chippewa Valley and Southfield A&T, given the strength of that schedule from West Bloomfield, and coming off of a loss of their own, a heartbreaking 23-24 loss on the road at North Farmington on Thursday night. Same night as West Bloomfield played, makes them now 6-1 and ruins their undefeated season as they go in to their senior night next week in Birmingham. And for West Bloomfield, they got 2 weeks left against two very good teams, the 6-1 Birmingham Groves Maples coming up next week in Birmingham. Then they'll finish the season off 2 weeks from now on the road at Roseville, a team that's coming into their game this evening 4-2, going up against L'Anse Creuse out of Harrison Township, another game that could have big implications. So the Lakers have a ton to play for over the next couple of weeks that could set them up still for really good playoff positioning. But more than anything else, Matt, this is about momentum. This is about understanding what needs to be done to win critical games against really good teams, because this is the time of the year where those mistakes like you saw on Thursday against the Oxford Wildcats, they don't just end the game, they could end your season.
Yeah, and especially on the road, those mistakes get magnified as they feed into that crowd atmosphere, and especially at a place like Roseville that's been a good football atmosphere the past several years, new stadium. It's going to be interesting to see how, if they have a few mistakes, if they bury their head in the sand, or if they come back and, like we've seen them against Lake Orion, just come out firing and forget about those mistakes.
We will keep you updated on our coverage for next week's game between the West Bloomfield Lakers and the Maples of Birmingham Seaholm, as that game will be covered by the Prep. We've been informed that they will be streaming that game next week. We'll do our best to have our radio coverage, possibly TV coverage as well, and keep you updated on that on civiccentertv.com/LakersSports, where you can watch all of our coverage from these live football broadcasts all throughout the season, and catch my conversation with Zach Hilbers on This Week in Laker Football early on in the week leading up to that Seaholm game. Matt, your lasting thoughts from that Oxford matchup and what the Lakers need to improve on, or what we need to see in the coming weeks to make them, again, contenders in the state of Michigan?
They need to establish the run first and foremost. That's really the most important thing for the Lakers. We saw that opening drive, Josh Tate really dominate, and then Oxford make it a point to stop him the rest of the game. We saw West Bloomfield really struggle to pick up first downs after that, and they just opted to pass more often than not, even though there were times where they were still able to move it with Tate and Shakespeare running it, but they felt that they needed to pass. if they can get out and just establish the run these next 2 weeks, I feel they'll put themselves in good position to win.
As we saw from Oxford's performance last night, you establish a run, you dominate in the rushing game. It sets up your passing game. The difference for West Bloomfield is they've got Bo Jackson playing some of the best football of his high school career, getting those footballs to his top receivers. And if they're able to make plays, Cam Flowers, Elijah Durham, Jaden Allos has been very big over the last few weeks for the Lakers in the receiving game. They've got a powerful offense and a defense that's been able to really shut down the game in the air throughout this season and has had signs of brilliance in that front seven as well in recent weeks. Matt, thank you so much as always for your time.
Yep, thank you for having me.